The purpose of this lesson is to go over some of the basic concepts and information that you need to know before you study respiration in detail. Now, our starting point is the basic chemistry of the hydrogen atom, and I've drawn one here. It's the simplest atom of all, and it simply consists of one proton of charge +1 in the nucleus and one electron of charge -1 orbiting the nucleus. We call the hydrogen atom H for short. If we do a quick charge count here, one proton has a charge of +1, one electron has a charge of -1, so the atom has a charge of 0 overall, or we say it's a neutral atom. Now I want you to imagine what happens when the electron gets enough energy to break away from the atom, and we can visualize that by deleting it here. And if we draw the electron over here someplace, now what you see is that all that's left behind is a proton of charge +1, and we now rename the hydrogen as simply H+, because it has a charge of +1 representing all that's left, which is simply the proton. This means from now on, whenever you come across H+, it represents a proton of charge +1, and E- represents an electron of charge -1. Now we can move on to some of the molecules that are involved in respiration. The ADP molecule, ADP stands for adenosine diphosphate, and just to go over the structure of this molecule, it consists of a base called adenine and a sugar called ribose and two phosphate groups. So all these units are bonded together to give us the ADP molecule. And what basically happens in respiration, as you're going to see, is that this ADP molecule, it gets some energy, and it uses that energy to bond to a third phosphate. So you can think of the energy as being stored in this bond here, and because there's now 3 phosphates, it becomes adenosine triphosphate, whereas the D in ADP standard for di, as in diphosphate. So basically the ADP molecule with energy and an extra phosphate becomes the ATP molecule. Another molecule that you need to know about is the NAD+ molecule. The plus again symbolizes the fact that it's a molecule that has lost an electron. The NAD stands for nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, and we'll be talking more about that in the next section, which I'm going to go on to now. So the chemical reactions that we're going to meet in respiration. Well, the first one we've already mentioned, really, the ADP molecule, and when it gets some energy, it can join with another phosphate, and it becomes ATP. And you can think again of the energy as being locked in the bond in the ATP. So the ATP is a high energy molecule, and water is given off as a waste product. We call this an anabolic reaction because these molecules are building up, the molecules on the left hand side of the equation are building this ATP molecule on the right hand side of the equation. Now the reverse happens as well. When the ATP arrives at its destination, wherever the energy is supposed to be released, it releases its energy in what's called a catabolic reaction, where it's breaking down into its constituents again, which are ADP and P. So that's the reverse reaction of the anabolic reaction over here. And similarly for the NAD+ molecule, it's involved in another energy reaction, and what happens is electrons become energized in the process of respiration, and so you've got your electrons and your proton here, and when they're energized, they sometimes get enough energy to join with the NAD+ molecule, and you get a high energy molecule again called NADH. And if you do a quick charge count here, it should all make sense, bearing in mind what we just discussed previously. The NAD+ has a charge of +1, two electrons have a charge of -2, the proton has a charge of +1. When you add all those together, 1 and 1, 2, -2 gives you an overall charge of 0. So this resulting high energy molecule NADH has a charge of 0. And of course the reverse reaction happens as well here. When the NADH arrives at its destination and it wants to release this energy again, it breaks down into its constituents, which are NAD plus, the 2 electrons, and the H plus, the proton. Lastly, before you study respiration, respiration is quite complex. A lot of detail involved in understanding all the steps. So it's no harm to just at this stage in your course have a quick look over some of the other parts of your course that are connected to this. Think of respiration as a major junction in your course, which brings a lot of parts of your course together. Just to mention some of these briefly, no harm to have a quick look back over these, and it will make your studying of respiration all that much easier. Of course, the whole point of respiration is to break down the glucose molecule in your cells, release the energy, and convert it to this form the cell can use called ATP. No harm to refresh your memory of how the energy got, or how the glucose got into the cell in the first place. It's from the carbohydrates that you eat in your diet, through the digestive system. It goes through your digestive system and passes to your circulatory system after digestion, where the glucose ends up in every cell in your body. And of course, from your breathing system, you're taking in oxygen in your lungs. It passes to your circulatory system and ends up in your cells as O2. The reverse happens with carbon dioxide and H2O. The waste products of respiration, they're passed back out through your circulatory system into your breathing system. And finally, as I said, the energy is released as ATP. Some other interesting links in your course that tie in with respiration. In photosynthesis, we studied ATP also. It's the same molecule. ATP is the universal molecule of energy really for all living things. So no harm to have another look at photosynthesis. The scientific method, we'll be talking about the Krebs cycle in respiration. This was a fairly recent discovery, relatively speaking. A guy called Hans Krebs discovered this in the 1960s, and obviously he would have gone through all the steps of the scientific method before this discovery would have been accepted universally by all scientists. So there's your reference to the scientific method, which is also on your course. There's an interesting comment to make on evolution here as well. We'll be discussing mainly aerobic respiration, which, for example, this is the way that humans get our energy, and most other, I suppose, of the more complex living organisms. But in terms of evolution, the first living things to appear would only have been able to do respiration anaerobically, without oxygen. And as life got more complex, they figured out a way to use oxygen to do this process. And the significance of this is when you can do respiration in the presence of oxygen, you can release far more energy, and it's far more efficient. And some other links just to finish up. You need to go back over the basic structure of the cell, because we'll be mentioning the cytoplasm, which is, I suppose, the main part of the cell outside of the nucleus. The cytosol, which is the cytoplasm minus the organelles, the organelles themselves, in particular the mitochondria, which is where a lot of the respiration processes happen. Enzymes, the main definition of respiration is that it's the controlled release of energy from food, and that word controlled is key, because what's controlling all this process in the cells are your enzymes, of course. So that's a nice way to link back to the enzyme part of your course. And already, as you've just seen in some of those molecules we talked about, like ATP and ADP, I mentioned ribose, which is a monosaccharide, just like, for example, glucose. And finally, the adenine that I mentioned, again in connection with ADP and ATP, that's one of your 4 bases that make up the basic structure of DNA. So that's it. That's your background. That's the background set really for the study of respiration in detail. So so please have a look at the other video I have made, which goes through the stages of respiration in detail. And that's the end of this lesson on the background of respiration.